All right guys, welcome back. This video is going to be a big one for the Dakota. Now, if you've been following along on the videos, you know we've been making huge progress on this thing. I mean, it's basically a complete truck again. So we got the whole front end back on. And the last video, we got the intercooler mounted and plumbed. So we got the cold side, the hot side. That's all done. There's only a few more things that we need to do in here as far as engine wise, and that's radiator hoses, and then we need to finalize the power steering. We need a reservoir over here and hook our lines up. But other than that, it's basically done. So we need to wire it and get fuel. Now, wiring is going to be the biggest project so far, so I figured we might as well just get it done. So basically, we're replacing the entire wiring in the truck with factory SRT4 stuff. So we got the entire dash harness from an SRT4, as well as the cluster. And my plan with this is to try to make it fit inside the Dakota housing. So we'll see how that goes. If not, then we'll try to just fit this in the dash. Then we have a factory SRT4 PCM. We had the security removed from it. And we have a factory SRT4 engine harness in there. And then finally, we have the full engine bay harness from an SRT4. And I think this is where we're going to start, because we know our starting point will be at the Firewall. So right here, this is where it's going to enter the Firewall, and this side will go to the dash harness, and then the rest of this goes in the engine bay. So I figured we start here. We know that this needs to go at the Firewall, and then we can lay it out from there. So I guess not much left to do, but just get this out and throw it in here and see how it sits. Now, the Dakota harness did enter the Firewall right there, and you see that's a square port. We have a round plug, but regardless, we'll probably use this as our starting point, and we can lay the harness out, stuff some of the plugs in there, and see how it lays. I think the fuse box will sit over here, and then we'll just go from there, and hopefully it'll match up pretty well in here. Obviously, the engine bay is a lot bigger than a Neon, but we'll see how it goes. All right, so here's our mess of wires, and this section right here will go into the cab. We're going to have to make a bigger hole for this to fit in the Firewall, but we could start going across. So there's our fuse box. It could sit right here on the fender well, and we can kind of work our way across here. Now, I'm not sure exactly where this wiring laid in the Neon, if it was up here up top or down below, but we'll figure it out. All right guys, this is actually working out pretty well. So I stuffed a bunch of the harness in there. Obviously we need to make this bigger so that this grommet fits in there, but as you can see, I've already been through all the harnesses and I labeled everything. So everything's labeled. So this is the connector that will connect to the engine harness. We have our lights over here, solenoids, but then there's stuff like this, reverse switch. Obviously, we don't have a transmission up here. It's way back there, so we'll have to extend that. Then I got the harness going down under the radiator, and it comes back over here. We have more of our lights, and then we have low pressure switch for the AC, and then wheel speed sensor, which we're not going to use. So that's another thing. This has both wheel speed sensors for the front that we're not going to use because we don't have them. And then we have the big ABS plug and stuff like that that we're not going to use over here. Power steering pressure, a few little modifications, but we're off to a good start. So I think what I'm going to do is two things. Make that hole bigger so the grommet fits in the Firewall. Then we'll mount the fuse box. It almost wants to fit right there, but I don't think it's long enough back there. So there's a nice flat spot on the fender well for this lower mount hole, but I think it's going to have to go a little higher up here like that, but it should work. So let me figure out how I'm going to make this square hole a round hole so this fits. We'll get that done, mount the fuse box, start deleting wires and tying this whole harness up, and then we can move on to the engine harness. Now, I'm not exactly sure how to go about doing this as far as showing you guys the wiring side of this whole thing. I think the best scenario is, I think I'm gonna do a little work and then do a progress update as we go instead of you watching wiring, because it's going to be boring. Obviously, the whole point of doing YouTube videos is people actually watch the videos, and if it's a boring video, nobody's going to watch. So I'm going to get some work done, and then we'll do an update. All right, first issue tackled. I cut that out to about a 3-inch circle, and now the grommet fits. So we've got the harness coming into the cab of the truck. So here's our dash harness connections. We got our OBD2 port right here. Next thing I want to do is mount the fuse box, get that situated, and then keep working our way around the engine bay. And we got the fuse box mounted. So I just drilled a hole for the little snap to go in there, put a bolt and nut down there. I'd say she's not going anywhere, so that's a good start. Now, as far as the wiring up here, I'm going to be deleting a lot of this because it's a lot of ABS stuff. So I'll unwrap it, take a bunch of it out. But what I want to do is start working my way this way, get the lights all wired in. We have the solenoids over here too, so we'll get those mounted. So over here we got the tip sensor, which we have right here. So that'll plug in. We just got to mount this somewhere. We have the ambient temp sensor there. I got the reverse switch going back that way because we have to go back to the transmission. And this is our headlight. I didn't even realize the Dakotas and the Neons had the same headlight bulb. So there we go, it plugs right in. So we'll just have to do the turn signal to here, and then we have the side marker light right here. Now this other one is for the ambient temp sensor, which is actually the temp sensor that goes pre-turbo. So we're gonna have to extend this one all the way across the engine bay. So for now, we'll just let that hang out. Let's move on to the headlights, which, like I showed you, the Dakota uses the same bulb as the Neon, so that just plugged right in. So we just gotta do the turn signal right here and the side marker bulb. All right, made a little progress, so let me give you a little update. So we got the tip sensor plugged in, the factory Neon headlight connector plugged right into the Dakota bulb, so that worked out. I got my turn signal wired into the Dakota turn signal bulb socket, got my side marker light wired in. Here's my PCM connectors. We're gonna have to mount the computer over here somewhere. Then I got a ground to the frame, and then the harness runs down through here. Then all across the lower radiator support down there. Then it comes up over here. So we have to do the same thing over here. We got to do our turn signal socket, side marker bulb, and then go through a bunch of this. There's like fog lights, which we don't need, horn and stuff like that. So I think I'm going to tackle this passenger side corner next, get the lights and everything figured out, and thin out what's left of the harness over here that we don't need, and then go back over there and ditch all the ABS wiring because we don't need any of it. And there we go, we got this side of the harness all done. So I got my turn signal wired in, side marker wired in. We have the horn wires here. I just don't have the horn in the truck, so someday we'll get to that. And then I had to delete the wheel speed sensor out of this harness here, but we have our low pressure switch for the AC for when we get the AC lines in. And then I just use existing holes in the clips that are already on the harness to kind of secure it there. It's secured down here, and then I use some zip ties, and I got this ground. So this side of the harness, all done. Who would have thought a Neon SRT4 harness would just fit in a Dakota like this? So it's working out real nice. But the next mess of stuff I got to go through, which is probably going to take some time, is all this stuff. Brake fluid level, we don't need. ABS, we don't need. And there's more ABS stuff in here. This goes to the engine harness. And then we got the battery temp sensor. We don't need that. And then there's a bunch more junk down here, like wheel speed sensor. We don't need that. So you guys get the idea. I got to delete all this out of the harness so that we don't have a bunch of just junk hanging out of here. And it'll clean it up, because basically all we need that comes from this harness is the plug that plugs into the engine harness. So time to delete a bunch of junk. All right, you can see my mess. I think I got it. So you can see all we have left is the connector for the engine harness, and then we have our downstream O2 harness here. Everything else has been deleted, all the ABS stuff. Brake fluid level sensor has been deleted. Steering rack pressure sensor has been deleted. For the battery temp sensor, I went ahead and put a 10K resistor in there. Now I think the tuner can disable the temp sensor, but just in case, I threw it in there. But everything else, I just cut the wires and put a little heat shrink on there and pinched the ends. Tried to stagger them the best I could. I mean, I know the right way would be to pull those lines all the way out, but we'll wrap this all up nice and neat, and you'll never know it was taken out. So that's next. Let me make it look a little prettier. I'm an idiot. So I got this looking all nice and pretty, right? And I took my time and got this all loomed up, only to realize I don't need the downstream O2. I just need the upstream. So now I get to delete this because we don't need it. And downstream O2 deleted. So next up is we need to extend the ambient temp sensor. We need to relocate this plug all the way over there because that's where the intake will be. It goes to this sensor, which goes in the intake pipe, which reads temp pre-turbo, and then the computer uses that along with the temp pre-throttle body to determine boost levels and all that nonsense. So we need to cut this plug off and run a long length of wire all the way to the other side. Okay, we got a plug extended for the ambient intake air temp sensor, so it just runs down along there all the way back up to the harness. So that's done. So next I'd like to get the radiator wired, but I don't have a plug that matches the SRT4 harness, and then the fan just has a universal plug. So I need to figure out a plug situation before we can handle that. So I think we'll go back over there and get the solenoids mounted and those plugged in. So I'm thinking over here it looks like a good spot. I just need to figure out a way to mount it. I do have this little aluminum bracket that I could bolt to the fender and then bolt the solenoids right there, and then here's our plugs. So I think that's the best case scenario right there. So I'm going to drill some holes in here to mount that, and then drill some holes in this, maybe a couple riv nuts in the fender to mount that, and we'll have our solenoids mounted. All right, I say that turned out pretty good. I just need some vacuum lines to those eventually, but all we have left is a reverse switch, which I'm waiting on a new speed sensor for the transmission. And then here's the harness that comes from the transmission, and we'll splice this to the reverse switch pigtail up here, and then the speed sensor pigtail on the engine harness. So we have one more thing to mount in here, and that's the PCM. And here's our connectors that go to that. But the engine harness also has a PCM connector. So before we make a mount and stuff for the computer in here, we want to make sure that the connector on the engine harness can reach also. So I guess we can go ahead and get the engine harness laid on here and see how close it fits. All right, I have no idea where to even begin on this. So we're going to lay that in here. Here's our PCM plug right here. Here's TPS, intake air temp. All right, what do we got? Coolant temp, AC pressure stuff. So that definitely is under here. Well, I think my luck ran out with the wiring. Engine harness, not even close to fitting on the engine. So I think I'm going to have to build a custom harness. So I think my plan is to delume this whole thing and see if I can manipulate it in a way that it fits the engine. If not, there's going to be some cutting and splicing, which I really don't want to do, but it is what it is. All right, check it out, guys. I just started. This is the alternator plug, and look at that. It's cut. I did not cut that. It was cut. So I guess it's a good thing we're going through it. Whew, that was a pain in the butt. It took me about an hour. There's my mess, but I got the whole harness stripped down. So after thinking about this for a minute, as I was doing this, I think what I might do, go ahead and mount the PCM in the truck, That way we know where this PCM connector goes. And what I'm going to do is depin it one circuit at a time. So for example, I'll depin the connector, take the idle air control valve wiring out, plug that in to the idle air control valve on the engine, and then see if I need to add length to the PCM connector or not, and then go from there. And then do the intake air temp sensor, injectors, all one at a time. And that way I can run them how I want them in the engine bay. So more than likely the PCM is going to be sitting right here, and we'll just have to do one circuit at a time, just wire it to the PCM. That's basically what I did when I put together a Chrysler Conquest. I did a V8 Magnum from like Dakota or Durango RT, and that's obviously OBD2. So I had to build a custom engine harness for that thing to run. So I mounted the PCM in the engine bay and then just did one circuit at a time, wired it up, and just made my own custom harness. And that thing fired up first try, so I think it's the move for this. I'll get that PCM mounted in the engine bay so we know where our wiring needs to go, and then I'll just do one circuit at a time. And it's going to take some time and be a pain in the butt, but should work. All right, so I have the original SRT4 PCM bracket, and I'm kind of liking this. If I bolted it to the bracket and mounted it right here on the fender well, I really like that position. It looks clean. I don't know if this is going to be sturdy enough, so we might have to come up with something else to tie it in somewhere, but I'm thinking these can be cut off, these two ears, because we won't need them. But yeah, that's my plan right now. So I'm going to put a nut and bolt in there and see how sturdy it is. All right, guys, here's what I got going on. I cut one of those ears off. Then you can see I twisted this one so that I can just use this existing hole for this mount right here. And now this side is actually level with the wheel well. So on this side, I can use this nut and bolt in this spacer. So we'll have a fastener point right here, and we'll have a fastener point right there, and that should be plenty strong enough. And there we go, that turned out good. So there's my bolt back there, got a bolt right there, and then the harness we can plug in there and right there. So there's our two connections, and that reaches perfect. And then the engine harness will go right there. So now we have our end point of where all the wiring needs to run, right here and then right here. So there's our two plugs that the engine harness plugs into. So now we can start laying all the wiring in here and start getting an idea of what we need to extend, what we need to shorten. And then once that's finalized, we can loom it all up and be done. All right, I got kind of a mess going on, but just trust me. So I got the entire harness in here, but obviously it's all in pieces. So I know it looks crazy right now, but just gotta trust the process. My plan, start in the back, work my way forward, start building the harness on the engine, and it'll just be one continuous straight shot. So I gotta get going while all this is still fresh in my mind. Of course I got cheat sheets, so wish me luck. All right, guys, after many, many hours later, I think I have a harness. So I know it still looks kind of like a mess, but a little bit more of an organized mess. So we got the coil, O2 sensor, cam sensor, all come in through the intake manifold, picks up all the injectors. We got TPS, auto air control valve, map sensor coming into the harness there, intake air temp sensor and coolant temp sensor coming to the harness, and they all go to the PCM plug. And then here's our branch off for the engine bay harness that connects to. And we also have our crank sensor coming down, alternator wiring, AC wiring under there, all coming up here. So now it's time to take this whole thing off and loom it and tape it up so it looks nice. I still have the vehicle speed sensor wires that I need to do, but we'll just leave a pigtail off of the harness here because I'm not sure how I'm going to run it back to the transmission. So time to take it off, make it look pretty. All right, guys, here it is. I did it. Freaking sucked, dude, but I'm so glad it's finally done. Took a ton of work trying to make it look nice, and I went through with a multimeter and checked continuity on every single circuit to make sure everything was where it's supposed to be. So it's done. Time to go back on the engine. Now this part is going to be super satisfying, getting to plug this in for the last time and have it all routed nice and neat. Oh yeah, that's nice. I like that. It fits. Crazy. Look at that. It looks so good in there. Everything lined up exactly where I wanted it. There's still a couple things we have to do, but the majority is done. So I got a pigtail here. This is for the vehicle speed sensor. And then of course, like I mentioned before, we got the reverse switch right here. So those two are going to run down to the transmission. So I think that's what's next. We've got the Dakota harness here. So we need to plug that in, probably relume it, get this nasty stuff off, and run these wires up to here, where we'll tie them into the switch and to the speed sensor. Now, funny enough, the factory SRT4 speed sensor is the same that's in this AX15 in this truck. So I'm going to take the one out of the transmission that we have and put the SRT4 one in there. They are different part numbers, but the plug that plugs into these, obviously the same, and the wire collars are the same. But I believe the pinout is a little different SRT4 to Dakota. So we're going to swap this SRT4 speed sensor in there and wire it to our harness up here. And then we'll probably be close when it comes to the speedo reading the right speed. But we'll likely have to run one of the Dakota digital speedometer converters where we can adjust and fine tune what the speedo reads. But for now, this will get us close, and at least it'll be wired up. So under the truck we go. Few more things to do before we can end the video. So if you're still watching, thanks. So SRT4 speed sensor in the transmission, got our reverse switch coming over and them joining up, and the harness runs up to the engine bay. Then they run to this 5-pin connector up to the harness. Now the only thing is the reverse switch is part of this main body harness, and then the speed sensor is part of the engine harness. And I have them joined together at that connector. So that means that in order to remove the engine harness, I'm going to have to cut the reverse switch harness. Now, when that time comes, I'll just put a 2-pin connector on this wire, probably up here where it exits the main harness. That way we can disconnect the reverse switch from this harness, and then this harness can be removed. But that's done, and I wish I could say I was done with wiring, but we're not, because we still have the whole dash harness to do inside. But as far as the engine bay goes, all we have left is power and grounds, and then this is all done. But I think I'm just going to knock that out, and then in the next video, I'll give you guys an update on all that, and we'll get started on the dash harness, the cluster, and probably the 2nd gen seat swap. So at least the interior will be somewhat complete before we try to start, because after that, we'll do the fuel, and then it'll be time to start. So appreciate you guys for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. So I just need to figure out how I'm going to fit this inside of there.